Another impactful player is coming back. Let's discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. R. Mason Thomas is coming back, Jay.
Look, I've talked about this week on and week off, and I told y'all my expectation was he was going to return. And shout out to me. I was right on the Grease reference. Tried to tell y'all that was back to school again. That what that whole reference was. But I love the fact that they had some fun with it. They all probably knew the one Oklahoma post that came out on accident to kind of say he was coming back. They'd already come to an agreement. But he probably did. I think R. Mason Thomas possibly did look at draft grades and wanted to see where he potentially was going to be. The 15th is really the date when he needed to make a decision fully, but he's coming back. And that's a huge thing for Oklahoma. The Marvin Jones Jr. pickup to go along with him, get you back to having two experienced edges out there while you get Danny Okoye and PJ Adebaware as well as Taylor Wine and Wyatt Gilmore. You get them all up and running. This is a huge pickup. Like, I don't think people understand that, and this is something we have to talk about here in the near future, really break down, John, is roster retention is a part of your roster management that comes with transfer portal acquisition. Like, you've got to, you're working on retaining your own guys because schools be tampering the heck out of players when they're really good because they know that you can't pay everybody. Right. Somebody's going to have to get left out on the pay scale. So they're going to come after one of them and be like, hey, they ain't paying you. You can come over here and play with us. We'll pay you over everybody else.
Well, and that's part of the trying to run this thing like an NFL front office that you're starting to see also is prioritizing your guys in quote unquote free agency and drafting. So recruiting and developing and then prioritizing your own players when it comes to name, image, and likeness. This is what you see successful teams doing at the NFL level. They draft really, really well, and they retain their guys that are really, really good players. And so retaining R. Mason Thomas, one, not letting him go somewhere else in the transfer portal, not even letting him get to the NFL because you value his production and his presence at the collegiate level. Whatever the one Oklahoma deal was enough to keep him from potentially being a top 50 pick in this year's draft. Now, there's going to be ways he can continue to work on his game. That's the developmental piece. But that's part of what Oklahoma's doing. We know that they've had to retain a lot of guys, and they've done so on the defensive side of the ball. I get questions on social media. Well, what about offense? Well, what about offense? What about offense? Offense, they got a lot of pieces. Okay. And you're trusting your offensive coordinator to make the ingredients work. And you can't have a good team unless this defense is retained. And this defense is going to be good, again, because you brought back Dominic Williams. You brought back R. Mason Thomas. You brought back Robert Spears-Jennings and Kip Lewis, Jaden Jackson. You brought all these guys back, Grayson Halton. And you're going to be good again. The cornerback room is going to continue to develop. And so I get why people don't want to get too excited about guys staying or get excited about a defensive addition on the transfer portal. Well, what was the only bright spot of the team this year? It was on the defensive side of the ball. Now you've overhauled your offense, and you're hoping they can match what your defense did.
And that's what's most important is that we hired a coach whose identity is defense. So, of course, he's going to prioritize the side of the ball that you hired him for. Now, granted, I totally understand the questions when it comes to what about the offensive coordinator? What about offense? What offensive players? Why aren't we getting more skills guys? Totally get that. Our goal on the offensive side of the ball had two problems. Number one was play calling, and number two was quarterback play because of said play calling. And then, of course, the last thing is we dealt with the slew of just ginormous injuries. Well, we've added some quote-unquote depth when it comes to the offensive line to make sure that we had some veterans to go along with the young players that had a year of being thrown in the fire and kind of growing from. So I'm not concerned about offensive line. I think my questions now are answered. I think from Logan Howland to both the Jakes and Isaiah Autry-Dent, I think we're good at tackle, even when you bring in the new guys. McClinko may see some run. Simmons may see some run. But you've got the young dudes that are ready to go ahead and play. Your guards, to me, you're set. You've got dudes that we've seen them be able to push people around and make things happen. Troy Everett being at the center spot and then bringing in, with Isosa and then Owen Hollenbeck right behind him. I think we're fine on line. Wide receiver room, you had a lot of young dudes, so you brought in guys that actually put up production last season. All we need to see now is if our quarterback play is going to be there. And I think that either Michael Hawkins or John Mateer can do a really good job in Ben Arbuckle's system because it's built to help a quarterback make life easier for them, John. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing I don't think people are getting when we say, I think the offense would be all right. Because truth be told, if we just had a top 40 defense, we would have won 3 more games. Because that's all we needed. The Missouri game, if we had offense, we win. Tennessee game, we had offense, we win. I mean, it's more so you're giving the ball back instantaneously. If you're not giving the ball back the minute you get the ball, you win the game. That's it. Ole Miss, I mean, if we didn't have another injury on the offensive line in the second half, we were up at halftime. So my point is, as long as we have a competent offense, I'm not stressing about it. I just want it to be competent. This defense can do it. But the last thing, I don't want to be too long-winded though, John, but I want to point this out. You had a top 10 defense and efficiency in most metrics last season. If you're not continuously getting better there, other teams are going to be ready for it. Mm-hmm. So adding additional names that people have to try to figure out, a Marvin Jones Jr., now that you've lost Ethan Downs, Caden Willard, as well as Trace Ford. Marvin Jones Jr. coming in there at the edge with R. Mason returning. Your corners, you need to add an additional component now that Kanai's not there. But if Gentry Williams comes back at least half-fold, you're solid. You don't have Billy Bowman out there no more. But Peyton Bowen's shown us that he has the capabilities, and Robert Spears-Jennings is back. So Kendall Daniels mixing in there with all of that. You don't have Stutzman, but you still got to be able to have pieces that can come in and play immediately. And I think that that's why you're seeing them making sure the defense is tooled, and then they'll focus on the offense as they need to.
Looking ahead to week 1 of the 2025 season, who do you think are going to be the starting edges opposite of R. Mason Thomas will start at 1. Who's going to be the other starting edge?
Honestly, I think it's going to be Marvin Jones. I think Marvin Jones has the ability to be that starter to begin with, but I expect a heavy 4-man rotation with Marvin Jones, R. Mason, Danny Okoye, PJ Adebaware. That feels like your 4-man rotation the first 3 games of the season, including Michigan. I think Michigan game, that's the one where you really see both of them because you're going to do a lot of one-on-one stuff against the tackle, and you're playing against a team that we haven't seen really do well in the forward pass, and a team that wants to bully you. That's Michigan's game. Shout out to Sharon Moore. That's how you win against certain teams that are really good and very finesse. Yeah, you just beat them up. And we kind of did that. That was a great example of us against Alabama. We just beat them up. And that's what you want to be able to do. If you can bully teams, honestly, to me, that was the success you saw out of Georgia and Alabama in the main years, right? LSU was different because they were just offensively, they were ridiculous. Like, you can't do anything about that. The defense was solid, but the offense was just absurd. Like, the defense didn't have to do much because the offense was that good. So, but playing bully ball, muddying up the waters, we saw most of the top 15 defenses in college football were all SEC teams. I think it was probably 7 or 8 out of the top 15 were SEC teams. Notre Dame was up there too. We saw what they did to Georgia. They bullied you. Mm-hmm. You want to be able to play that bully ball, and I think that adding more strength on the defensive side of the ball is critical to be able to continue to do that.
Will Oklahoma have a top 7 or top front 7 in the SEC next year? We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.